Hey, this is Jeff from the Raygun Girls, doing a little bit of a tutorial here. I keep getting asked how I get the guitar sounds, drum sounds, and the thick mix from my recordings. And people are surprised when I say that I use Garageband and mostly free plugins. So here I'm going to go through some of the steps that I do to get the sound that I get, and the guitar plugins that I use, and all that neat stuff. Little disclaimer, I am not an engineer, never went to school for recording, so everything I know and I do, I've picked up over at least 10 years of using GarageBand. There might be a better way. There might be something that's might be redundant in some parts, but this is how I do it. It works for me. I'm not using a lot of processing power on the computer, so why stop there? So let's start off with the drums. This is the auto drummer. That does not look like an auto drummer track. Why? Because I do something special. First, create a drummer track. The auto drummer. As you see, this looks more like the auto drummer on GarageBand because that's what it is. I lay down 10 minutes of this, jam, find something I like, then start putting the song together. And when I'm putting the song together, then I put the parts together. So I'll have an intro, verse, chorus, different drums for each part. Fix them how you want. Change the fills, cymbals, kick, snare, all that stuff down here and up here. Copy, paste, verse 1, verse 2. And then in verse 2, I'd still change the fill a little bit because you don't want it to sound exactly the same, because a live drummer wouldn't do it exactly the same. Unless maybe you're Phil Rudd, who is a machine, but you're not. So don't pretend to be. All right. So once you've got your whole song set up the way you want it to, you got to make sure you got all the fills the way you want them, the spots the way you want them, because it's going to be really hard to try to fix it later. So get it the way you want the first time. Now we create a new track. It's going to be software instrument. Get your drum kit. Pick any one. It doesn't matter because you're not using that sound. The great thing about the auto drummer is that the sound is much better than the software sounds. Click the head, the track head. That'll highlight the whole track. Copy. Go down to your drummer, software drummer, and paste. So copies and paste the whole track. Go up to the top. Delete everything on that track. See, nice and empty. Click your software drummer to highlight the whole track and drag it up. And that's it. Now you can play with it however you want. Add cymbals, add crashes, add fills, change fills, change the levels if you want the kick drum a little louder. There are different ways to do that. Actually, there's the velocity that you can change, but then there's also the track. There we go. There's your mix here for the auto drummer. I've got it set up in a certain way, so I have saved a preset for the auto drummer. Like this, sometimes I add some room to it for Titanosaur recordings, because I also am Titanosaur. But that's more classic rock. Then I've got these plugins here. I've got the EQ set up, taking some of the fatness out of it. Compressor, and then adding a little bit of again, I might have been redundant by lowering that on the EQ and then adding the excite, maybe, I don't know. And then I've got a high pass on top of that, high pass filter. This is what it sounds like without all that stuff. Now, if you add it, this is what your drummer sounds like. So there's a difference. I got the sound that I like mixed with my music. You play with it. You need to play with it and figure out what works for you. And once you're done with that, you can delete that software instrument so it doesn't take up any of your processing power. All right. So we've got the drums down. Now let's go to the guitar. I have 4 guitar tracks. 2 are panned to the left, 2 are panned to the right. They're the same track. The guitar's playing the same thing. But I play it and record it 4 different times because you want the sound waves to fill in the spaces. You see here, this is one guitar. This is the next guitar. The sound wave's different. They're not exactly completely lined up. And so they fill in the spaces, which thickens the sound. You've got the guitar panned all the way to the left, hard left, is going to be a higher pitched sound. Higher pitched sound is going to be on the outside. The lower pitched sound is going to be on the inside because that's going to sort of be the bridge between the guitars and the bass. For heavy metal, you need the guitars and the bass to really lock in with each other sonically so that you can get a nice thick sound. So this is what the outside guitar sounds like. It doesn't sound fantastic. It's kind of crappy, and that's okay. This is what I call the inside guitar. Not fantastic, but it works when you put them together. So that's just on the left side. If you put all 4 together, now we're talking. Now that's heavy. That's heavy metal. But it's totally not done yet until you add the bass. But let's talk about the guitar levels first before I get to the bass. So the outside, I've got 12 decibels. When you get further in, I lower it. Because the further it goes in to the center, the louder it sounds. Because it's taking up more of the sonic field, left to right. So if you bring it further in, it's going to fill up more sound. So it sounds louder even though it might not be. So you have to lower it a little bit so that it's in the right spot. That's going to take playing, figuring out for yourself, listening while you play it back to your own guitar and see what works for you. I know that for Raygun Girls, this level works for me every time. And for Titanosaur, I have a totally different level because it's a different guitar sound that I have there. Now the bass is 2 bass tracks. This is a trick that I found out maybe 5 years ago looking for tutorials on YouTube. It is the same bass track. Unlike with the guitars, this is the exact same bass track, copy and pasted. Because with bass, you're not trying to fill in the sound waves. You're not trying to make it thicker because bass is thick already. So what you're doing is you've got one bass being the low, thick end on the bottom, and the other bass giving it definition so you can hear some of the notes. This is the low end. Now, depending on what kind of bass you play, that might be enough. But I'm using a Fender Strat, Fender Jazz bass, plugged straight in, no preamp, no nothing. So for what I want, I need to add the other bass, and this is what that sounds like. And then I put them both together. It's a thick, dirty ass bass. And that's what I want, so I got it. So that's dealing with the sound waves, the levels. With bass, I got the lower end, lower volume, and the higher end a little on the higher side of the volume. And again, that works for me. Yours might be different depending on the kind of bass you play or how you play it. I play with a pick. It all changes the sound. The kind of pick you play with, if you use your fingers, if you do finger picking, the type of bass you play, the chord you use can also change. And if you use a preamp, that all changes how you are going to need to set up your sound. All right, so let's go through some of the pedals I use here. Totally free. The outside, the thin guitar. Got a noise gate. That's stock plug-in. The Ignite pedals and amps, those are all free. Available out there. Just got to look for them. They're everywhere. I got the Tyrant Screamer with this setting. The Emissary Head. The Nadir Convolver with this cab. And then I've got it EQ'd like that, with lots of the low end taken out. It's thin. It's supposed to be thin. And then for my particular style, for the Raygun Girls, I add a little bit of echo. And especially this song, it needs it. For the inside, what I call the inside guitar, it's a lot simpler. Got the noise gate, a pedal board, which right now I don't use any of those pedals for, but they're there just in case, because you see the little light's not on. This is the amp that I use, and play around with the location of the mic. You can do this on GarageBand, so play around with it. It changes the sound. Again, depending on what kind of guitar you're using. I'm using a Fender Strat, plugged straight in, no preamp. And then channel EQ for the inside, I've got it set up like this. So the inside has a little extra on the high end and somewhat on the flat side for the rest of it. And just a little bit of the low end cut out. So this I played around with to get what I wanted. Now the bass, the first bass, got the noise gate, compressor, the Tyrant Ignite amps pedal. So the first bass, I've got it set up like this. Second bass is going to be set up differently. And then the amp head for bass. And the cabinet. And this is how I have it set up for the EQ for the first bass. So you've got the high end cut out there. And then because you want it thicker, you've got the low end pushed up just slightly. The second bass has the low end cut out. And it's really boxed in there. Again, you got your noise gate, a compressor, the Tyrant, bass head, and the amp cab. There you go. So those are the settings for the guitars. And that's pretty much it. You add the drums, and then you got a whole sound. But of course, that's not it totally, because now you've got the master track. Now, I do everything so that it's radio ready. I'm not sending it off to be mastered. This is it, because I'm trying to do everything with as little money as possible. That's what I got. So I'm setting it up. I'm setting it up to be done, which means that it's going to be loud, because even though there were these loudness wars 10 years ago or something, I try to put dynamics into the song. So definitely, I believe in dynamics. Dynamics are necessary to keep you interested. Without the dynamics, it's a very flat song. Absolutely. But there is a thing about having to keep it loud, because it needs to be competing with other songs that have been mastered and their volume raised, because it pisses people off when if they have to constantly be reaching for their phone to raise the volume, or reaching for their stereo to raise the volume, or lower it. You're not going to get into a playlist if your volumes are all totally different. That's just reality. So you need to raise it if you're not sending it off to get mastered and whatnot. So with that in mind, this is the only place where I use paid plugin, the Ozone Suite. I use the maximizer and the equalizer. The first thing is your equalizer. I've got it set up like this. Why? I don't know. It just sounds good. I've been turning down the bass you saw in a little bit of the drums, a little bit of the low end in the bass, so it's not muddy. And now here I'm turning some of it up. I don't know why. It just works. I've tried it the other way, where in this equalizer it's flat, and on the bass I've got to turn the low end turned up a little more, and it sounds like mud. Go figure. Then you've got the dynamics. Why is it set up like this? I don't know. This is what works. That dynamics processor. And now the Petite Exciter, it was free for the first month or so, or longer. I don't remember how long it was. I remember seeing an email, saw it, got it, was amazed by what it did to the music, overdid it, and then had to cut back. I've got it set up 1.26 with a high of 0.56. Unfortunately, I believe it's a plugin you have to pay for now. Then the multiband compressor. Again, why? I don't know. Pre-gain is all the way down -10, and I've got these settings here for the rest of it. I've tried a whole bunch of different settings. The way you try things is you put it all the way down to 0 and see what changes as you go up. Put it all the way to 100, see what changes as you go down, and then find the middle spot that you like. I've got a stereo expander, and I'll go through these as the song's playing, so you can hear how things change with them. And then after the stereo expander, I've got the maximizer. This is what's going to raise the volume. I've got the threshold in -3.8, and I've got this up to +3, and the output at +6.8. Always be careful of clipping. If you're clipping, then you gotta EQ something. You gotta find where the clipping is and change the EQ. If it's your vocal, then you gotta maybe get further back from the mic. It depends what is causing the clipping, but always be aware of that. Now that used to be it for me, and then I would export it, play it in my car, and then go, wow, that sounds great. And then I realized, wait a minute, I've got the bass turned up in my car and it sounds great. Why can't I export it with a bit thicker low end? So I added on another exciter at the end. Is it redundant? I don't know. I tried moving it around. I tried changing the equalizer maybe, and this was what I found to work best for me. Added the exciter. It's either 1 or 0.8. Somewhere in there is the sweet spot for my music, and I love it. So do what works for you. This is not using a lot of processing power. My computer still works fine. I can do 3-4 different things at once, and it doesn't explode. All right, let's hear how these all change the sound of the song. None of them are on. Now if we just change the equalizer, you're going to hear a little bit of a difference. Going to add the dynamics processor now. Here's where you might hear a big difference. Now I'm stopping it before I do the next one. So a couple of things here. So you were able to hear, some of the differences, I hope. With the exciter, it started getting a little fatter. The compressor started squishing some of the instruments together, so it sounded more cohesive. And the stereo expander widens it. So when I discovered the stereo expander, I was like mind blown. Wow. Okay. So a couple of things before I press the ozone maximizer. Right now for this recording, I've got it down to 10, so you can hear my voice over the music. But I normally have it up to 0. So let's put it up to 0. Okay, so I'm going to hit the maximizer, and you're going to hear it and see it. It's going to increase the volume tons, and the level's going to go up into the red. Again, repeating. I don't send this out to get mastered. If you're going to send it out to get mastered or any other process after you finish recording, you don't want it in the red. You want to give the next person enough room to play with. That's very important. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to do much for you, and it's just a waste of your money. So you really want to keep it down in the green, unless in the yellow, if you're sending it out to somebody. Because then they'll have lots of room to work with the EQ or compression or anything else to pull out what you want pulled out. But I'm sending this off straight to radio from here. So I'm going to put it into the red. I'm not going to clip though, because I'm careful of that. After many years, I figured out what can cause clipping for me in my instrumentation. For me, it's usually the high end that I have to watch out for, causing the clipping. So here we go. This is without. And now this is with the ozone maximizer. Big difference. You saw how it was clipping, not clipping, going into the red. Some might consider that being in the red is clipping, but if you can't hear it, then it's not clipping. Again, the illusion of sound. My focus is on getting something that sounds right, that feels right. Whether it's done, quote unquote, right, that's debatable. The very last thing I do is I add another exciter at the end. We already went through that whole thing. Let's see if you can tell it. I can tell because I've been listening to this for a while and figured it out. But let's see if you can hear it. Someone beside me. Someone inside me. Everything's gone in the colors I choose. I won't move. So that's it. That is how I get the Raygun Girls sound. I hope it made sense. I hope it works for you. I hope it helps you. Remember, it's just about creating music and what sounds good. It doesn't matter if that's how the pros do it or not. It's what sounds good, what's not blowing up your computer. So, you want to find ways that are using the least amount of processing power, but getting you what you are trying to find. And you want to find something that is your own, unique. You might be able to figure out what somebody else does to help their sound and use it and create a totally different sound. That's what I did with the bass. That's how I figured out this is how a lot of newer bands apparently record their thick bass, the dirty bass and chunk. But I've got my own guitar sound and my own bass sound because of how I play and what I play. So enjoy. Hope this helped. And if there are any questions, put them in the comments, and we'll see when I do another one of these. All right. Thank you very much for listening, and go check out Orphan on all your streaming services.
Someone beside